Hello and welcome to this lab demonstration on using standard switches. After completing this lab video, you will be able to create standard virtual switches and virtual machine port groups on a vCenter server and attach virtual machines to the virtual machine port groups. Networking is a fundamental part of almost every VMware solution. In this lab, we will focus on basic configuration components, standard virtual switches, port groups and physical adapters acting as uplinks to the physical network. We're not going to cover concepts such as distributed virtual switches, VLAN configuration and policies that relate to virtual switches. So consider this lab as an introduction to networking in vSphere, but make sure that you dig deeper into the subject before you touch the networking configuration in a production environment. For this lab, you should already be familiar with the vSphere client user interface and you should have a basic understanding of networking technologies. In this lab exercise, we will start with viewing the standard switch configuration of one of our ESXi hosts. Then we will create a standard switch with a virtual machine port group on that same ESXi host. And we will do the same on another ESXi host. Finally, we will attach a virtual machine to the virtual machine port group and verify network connectivity. I'm sure I provided you enough good reasons to watch the following video on using standard switches. Now, let's get started. In the first task of this lab, we will view the configuration of the existing standard virtual switch, vSwitch 0, on ESXi host SA-ESXi01. We want to perform the configuration on vCenter server SA-VCSA01, so the first step is to connect to this server. Then we log in as administrator at vsphere.local and the configured password. So first thing we have to do is select the ESXi host on which we want to view or change network configuration. I open our ICM data center. Then I expand the folder lab servers and now I select ESXi host SA-ESXi01. Now on the right, we click Configure and under Networking we select Virtual Switches. On this ESXi host there is a single standard virtual switch, vSwitch 0. This switch has an uplink to the physical network through network interface card through the physical adapter VMNIC0. And we have three port groups attached: IP storage, management network, and VM network. In this configuration, no VLAN ID is configured for any of the port groups. This means that all these port groups are in the same VLAN, actually in the untagged VLAN. And if you look to the IP addresses of the VM kernel ports, IP storage and management network, you see that they are all in the same network, 172.20.10. This shows us that they don't use separate VLAN IDs, they are all in the same IP network. When we look at the VM network, we can expand down here and we see the virtual machines that are part of this port group. In the next task of this lab exercise, we want to add a virtual switch, actually to both ESXi servers, SA-ESXi01 and SA-ESXi02. Let's begin with SA-ESXi01. This one is already selected. So what we do is we click the Add Networking link here under Virtual Switches. Now we have to select the connection type. A VM kernel network adapter is a network adapter that is used by the ESXi host itself to provide any services, such as vSphere, vMotion, or IP-based access to networking, or access to the management interface of the ESXi host. We want to create a port group that is used by virtual machines, so we select Virtual Machine Port Group for standard switch. So we click Next. And now we could add the port group to an existing standard switch, or we want to create a new standard switch. And that's what we want to do here. So we select New Standard Switch. And you see that you could set the MTU for that standard switch. We leave the default of 1500 bytes. We click Next. And now when we create that new standard switch where the port group should be attached to, we can also assign adapters. So we can assign a physical adapter which provides access to the physical network, an uplink. So we click the plus sign here to add an adapter. Now we see the physical network interface cards of this ESXi host. And for this lab, we want to use VMNIC3 as our physical adapter. We click OK. So now we click Next. Now we have to configure the name, the network label for this port group. Let's use production. We do not configure a VLAN. This simply means that all untagged traffic that is coming from the physical uplink will go into this port group. We click Next. So we can review what we just configured. It will be a new standard switch, vSwitch1. We create a new port group on that switch, which is production, and the uplink adapter is VMNIC3. The MTU is 1500 bytes, and the VLAN ID is unset. So let's click Finish. Now if we scroll down in the list of our virtual switches, we see an entry for our new switch, vSwitch1. That's the switch we just added, so I expand it. And what we see is that we have a physical adapter, which is VMNIC3, and we have a port group called production. Now we want to create the same vSwitch on our ESXi host SA-ESXi02. So I have to select that ESXi host in the navigator pane. On the right side, we click Add Networking. Again, we want to create a virtual machine port group for a standard switch. We want to create a new vSwitch. We want to add the uplink, which is network adapter VMNIC3. We move on here. Now we assign the name to the port group and we use production again. We click Next. And then we click Finish to actually create the vSwitch and the port group. We can see the new virtual switch here. So when I expand it, let's scroll down a little bit. We see the new switch. It has a physical adapter VMNIC3 and it has one port group called production. The configuration is identical to the one that we created on SA-ESXi01. So we are not using any VLAN ID. All untagged traffic that we receive from the physical adapter will go into this port group. At this point, we created a standard virtual switch on ESXi host SA-ESXi01 and on ESXi host SA-ESXi02. We did not configure distributed virtual switches, but we configured a standard switch which we have to configure separately on each ESXi host. Now in the next task, let's add a virtual machine to the virtual machine port group that we just created. We will connect the virtual machine called Win1002 to that production port group. So in the navigator pane, we go to VMs and templates. Then we expand the ICM data center. We expand the lab VMs folder. And in here we find some virtual machines, and we want to change the network configuration of the Win1002 VM. So let's select this virtual machine. We right-click the VM and we select Edit Settings. Now we expand Network Adapter 1 and we see that it's currently attached to port group VM Network. So let's open the network connection and I click Browse so that we see a list of all the port groups that are available. At the moment, the VM was in port group VM Network, but we want to change this now to port group Production. So I select Production and click OK. What are the other options? Well, there is the status, and as you can see, Connect at Power On is activated. The adapter type is VMX Net3. Direct Path I/O is enabled, and we see the MAC address, and this MAC address was automatically created. If you need to have a static MAC address on your virtual machine, then you would change the type here. You would go from automatic to manual, and then this MAC address field here would not be grayed out, so you would be able to edit it and you could type in the MAC address that you want your virtual machine to use. Let's click OK. So what we did is we changed the port group to Production. Now let's power on the virtual machine and verify network connectivity. While the virtual machine is booting up, let's have a look at its hardware configuration in the summary view. And we can see that Network Adapter 1 is connected to port group Production. And we are connected, and this is the MAC address that the virtual machine uses. And we are in the Customize view. So let me change to the classic view here. You might be more familiar with this view. So when we want to check the network settings in this view, then we open the VMware hardware. And again, we see the network adapter here. We have to expand it to see the MAC address in this classic view. Now let's launch a console connection to this virtual machine. In this case, we use the web console. So a new tab opens in our browser and we are connected to the virtual machine. The virtual machine itself is configured to auto login, so we are already logged in, as you can see. Now let's have a look at the networking configuration of the virtual machine. So what I will do is I will start the command window, and in here I will release the IP address that we currently have. And now I will renew the IP address. As you can see, the virtual machine received an IP address from a DHCP server. The IP address is 172.20.11.200. The default gateway is 172.20.11.10. So let's see if we can ping the default gateway. And as you can see, the ping is successful. There's just one thing I want to add here. Based on this test, you may or may not know whether your uplink, your physical connection out of your ESXi host to the physical network is operational or not. Why can't we say for sure, even though the ping of the default gateway works? Well, the IP address that we have on the default gateway, that host might be a virtual machine as well. And if that virtual machine is running on the same ESXi server, then it would simply be another virtual machine running on the same ESXi host being attached to the same port group. In such a case, we successfully verified port group configuration because the two VMs can talk to each other, but we didn't leave the ESXi host. We didn't connect to an external physical network. In this lab, this does not apply because we created the virtual switch and we created a port group. So it was empty and we only attached this one VM to the port group. So as we are successful in pinging the default gateway, we are obviously leaving the ESXi host through the uplink, through our physical adapter. We are done on this virtual machine. And now let's do the same for the VM Win1004. So I right-click the virtual machine. I click Edit Settings. At the network adapter, we change the port group from VM network to production. We click OK. Now we power up the virtual machine. We launch a web console. The VM is still booting up, so let's wait a little bit. You see that we are automatically logged in. Now let's start a command prompt window again. Now we release the IP address. And then we renew the IP address. We are in the same network, 172.20.11. The IP address of this virtual machine is 201, and the default gateway is the same, 172.20.11.10. So let's again ping the default gateway. And again, we are successful. Let me go back to the vSphere client, to our ESXi host. The two virtual machines are running on host SA ESXi01. And in the networking configuration under virtual switches, I expand the virtual switch that we created to show you that we now have two virtual machines inside our port group production on this ESXi host. It's virtual machine Win1002 and Win1004. Congratulations! You have completed the Using Standard Switches lab demonstration video. In this lab, we had a look at the networking configuration of ESXi host SA ESXi01. We examined the standard virtual switch vSwitch0. Then we created a new standard virtual switch vSwitch1 with a virtual machine port group called production. And we added a physical adapter VMNIC3 to the virtual switch as an uplink to the physical network. We did these steps on ESXi hosts SA-ESXi01 and SA-ESXi02. Finally, we attached virtual machines to the production port group, Win1002 and Win1004. We powered on the virtual machines and we verified network connectivity. You now know how to connect a virtual machine to a physical network. This is an important skill when managing a vSphere solution. Thank you for watching this lab demonstration video. I hope the knowledge acquired here will help you with your daily job assignments, and good luck as you continue your journey in VMware World.